right? So there's little tricks and tips, right? As a life coach, I can shell out a bunch of little tricks and tips to where you can show up and blog daily, and you can list out your goals and tick them off and whatnot. And that stuff's important too. But that won't be sustainable. That won't carry you through long term. It won't stick around unless you start loving yourself and showing up for yourself.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. Today we are continuing our conversation with addiction expert Erin Colleen Linzi. We had a fantastic first half of the conversation with her in the prior episode, so make sure to check that out if you haven't already. And today we're going deeper. We're going to learn how to step into a role of authority in our lives, especially if we're dealing with addictive tendencies. We're going to talk about how to overcome that victim mindset that can so often plague us. I know, especially for me, I struggle with that. Erin herself is going to share a personal story of her struggling with this victim mentality. And then we're going to discuss how to balance self-compassion with discipline. I think this is something all of us yogis struggle with. How do we know when to practice self-love? And how do we know when to give ourselves a little kick in the butt, especially when we're trying to establish a new routine or overcome addictive behavior? We're also going to learn how we can make our yoga practice play an active role in overcoming any addictive behaviors. If you missed getting to know her in the first episode, Erin Colleen Linzi is an addiction and eating disorder recoveree. She struggled with drinking, pills, and bulimia for 12 years. After a divorce, getting laid off from her job, and being completely fatigued and bedridden, she rose from that rock bottom place and found peace through nourishing her body, through yoga, meditation, and life coaching. And she now owns a yoga studio called Thrive Yoga and Fitness and a recovery coaching company called Thriving After Addiction. Before we dive into all the beautiful knowledge she has to share with us, I wanted to remind you two special ways that you can support the podcast. It means so much to me. One is by leaving an iTunes review, even if iTunes isn't normally how you listen to the show. That really helps get the show in front of more people who are thirsty for this knowledge. And the second way is to make a purchase at SavannahSpirit.com. They have incredible products, and the ones I'm highlighting right now are actually some of their clothing. They have beautiful yoga pants, graphic tees, and these really comfy Thai fisherman pants that you can dress up or dress down. Check them out online. They're so chic and so comfortable, and they look great with mala beads, which you can also get on Savannah Spirit. So be sure to check out all those gorgeous finds at SavannahSpirit.com, and you want to use that code podcast30. That's going to get you 30% off whatever your heart desires. All right, now jumping back into our conversation with Erin, let's take it away. In the last episode, we ended by talking about false past memories, which I think is such a great concept for us all to be aware of. Erin shared the story of one of her clients who was remembering a childhood memory from their father that turned out just not to be true at all. Like they were interpreting that memory as their father didn't love them. And that was the farthest thing from the truth. Erin, it reminds me of a story I read about money mindset, and the man had a memory of breaking into his piggy bank as a young boy, going across the street in downtown to buy a candy bar that he was really excited about, really craving. He had seen an ad for it on TV, and then came home and his mother just screamed at him. And he downloaded this whole money mindset of like, oh my gosh, I'm not allowed to spend money on myself. I'm not allowed to indulge in things that I want, even when it's my own money, right? Because it was from his own little piggy bank. And years and years and years later, when he investigated his money mindset, he asked his mother about the memory. And she said, oh yeah, I was so angry at you that you left the house and crossed that busy street to go downtown by yourself. You could have gotten killed, right? So she was so angry, but for like a completely different reason than he had thought. So I think when we start trying to find, like we talked about in the last episode, finding these root causes of our pain, and so often they're these small memories that we've misinterpreted, it can be so powerful to have the conversation with your mom or your dad and kind of get to resolution, but it can be scary to approach them. What do you tell your clients to do? Do you tell them to actually have a conversation with the person involved in the memory?
I mean, it depends on the situation. If it's a parent that you still have somewhat of a relationship with, then for sure it might be worth going towards. But a lot of times, everyone, like we're all walking around in our own little bubbles, right? And especially with memories with parents, I mean, my mom doesn't remember half of the stuff that I talk about. She's like, I never did that. I'm like, yeah, you did. So, and who knows, like maybe it didn't happen. Maybe my memory of that is a make 'em up. But I think that, willing to talk about it with either that person or with a professional or with a trusted friend is necessary to start to sort things out, because things that are buried in our subconscious, like these past memories and false beliefs, they have quite a bit of power, right? So they've been playing in the background for a while. Thoughts are just little entities that really love power, and then sometimes we believe them so much that they become belief patterns. And so if we want to sort of change what's going on in our life in the present, a lot of times that's our telltale, right? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep doing this thing? Even underneath little ticks and stuff. And I won't get into that realm too much, but, like little quips we have about ourselves. A lot of the times it's something that's subconscious that we do, and we don't even realize it. So I think it's totally worth going into as far as the process of self-evolution, because we don't come with user manuals. So at least I haven't found mine. I don't know if you found yours. And the way that we figure out how we operate is to get intimate with ourselves and know our belief patterns, our thought patterns, what emotions they cause, and then accepting accountability, knowing that you're choosing this over and over again. And, why am I choosing this? And so I've had so many cases of people, bringing up pain points, and then we dive deeper in, and then we prove the thought wrong. And then it's almost like magic. I mean, sometimes that happens. Other times there's like different strands of it that are crisscross and are complex, but getting to know ourselves and freeing up, especially some of the big pain points, is so necessary for recovery. And not just recovery, but just like living a more peaceful, full life.
Stepping into that place where you say, I choose, and letting go of the victim mentality is so hard. And I'm sure you see it every day when you work with people with addictions. And again, I think we're all addicts in our own way. What do you tell people to get them to that empowered place, or to even help them recognize that they're not a victim of their circumstance? None of us are, that we're actually choosing every day what we're building, what we're putting out there.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, a lot of times when people are in victim mode, you need to come with a whole lot of compassion. Like they need a Snuggie, they need some hot tea, they need a cookie, like, not literally, but emotionally. So when I approach people who are in that victim mode, I like to ask them, so, what is that doing for you? I'm just like out of curiosity with fascination. By choosing that thought that makes you feel so disempowered and so weak, if you are to choose your thought, right? Even if you were to guess, like what little thing or satisfaction do you get from choosing that? And a lot of times people kind of like, what do you mean? And then we'll have to kind of like, well, there's, a benefit to being indecisive, or, what's the benefit of being angry at him? Like, oh, well, if I'm angry at him, I don't have to actually, address my weaknesses. Like, aha. So then that, like when we start to explore it from that angle, a lot of times people start to open up, and they're trying to look at it from like a scientific standpoint rather than a blamey type of standpoint. And it becomes a lot easier because the shame dissolves.
That was a huge epiphany for me. Just to interject, is this idea that even when we're in that victim mode, there's a secret benefit we get from choosing that thought, right? It's like either you're abdicating responsibility, or, choosing to stay a victim means you don't have to get off the couch and stop watching Netflix or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is, a lot of times it's like, and then it can boil down. It's familiar, right? It's comfortable here. I know I'm okay. Like I'm not doing great, but I'm all right. I'm not going to choose to stay here watching Netflix on the couch. Or my husband the other day, I was just, I have emotions and feelings like everyone else, of course, like all yogi people do. And we do yoga to manage. It's just a tool, right? And so I was having a day where, my tools, I was using them, but it was a strong emotion that came up. And so I was a little victim-y. And, my husband was trying to help me, and I could sort of take a step back and witness myself holding on to the pain, right? Holding on to being mad at him for something stupid. And I was asking myself, like, why are you doing this, Erin? Like, what are you getting out of this? And my husband was being so sweet. He's amazing. And, I started to soften and go into it. And, there was an odd satisfaction in holding onto that pain and being, in that moment, I wanted to be the victim. It was very interesting. I don't think I've ever quite caught myself in that way. And I didn't want to be rescued. I just wanted to be the victim. Just leave me alone. And it was so amazing because I have seen so many people, and Brett, you can probably, relate to this. Like sometimes people just want to be in that space and they don't want to come out, and you have to wait till they're ready. And I think that's a key also with, sometimes with, doing addiction recovery coaching and recovery coaching for eating disorders. Sometimes I'm approached by the family members and they're trying to, get me to sign up with their son, daughter, relative. And I'm like, listen, guys, like if they're not ready, this is a waste of money and I don't want to do that. And so we have to be ready to come out of that victim mode, but also, like you said, understanding what it's giving to you is key. And then whatever it's giving to you, can you give that to yourself in a different way?
So what did you do in that moment? Did you because it seemed like you felt yourself feeling not ready to stop being a victim yet. So when you're feeling that way, what do? Do you just kind of indulge yourself a little bit, practice self-compassion? Do you actually go get, some hot tea and a cookie? Like what's the best thing for us to do? Because I've been there too. I know that feeling.
Yeah. So it depends on situation. In that particular situation, I told him, hey, I need a moment, but I don't want you to leave. And he was patient enough to, okay, I'm just going to sit here. And I needed to talk from my space of pain, even if it didn't make sense. And I needed to touch that space of pain within me. So I wanted to stay there and I wanted to figure it out. And then I kept breathing and I kept softening. And so I would say that I indulged it a little bit, but I also definitely went into it because I could feel the resistance around it. And once I sort of softened that resistance, right, the pain around it of being victim-y wasn't so bad anymore. And then when I started talking, even if at first it was just babbling, it started to make sense. And then it came down to something like, I was hurt by something that you said, which was, I was hurt because I thought about something that you said in a certain way. And then it actually opened up a beautiful communication. And so sometimes the pain is intense and we're not sure what to do with it. And we do need to take that sacred pause to figure it out, right? It depends because different emotions have different impacts on us. And there's certain emotions, like for me, I can handle grief very well. Sadness, pro. Give me guilt or give me disappointment, I want to run out of the room. So there's different emotions that we get a little bit more skilled at handling, but then we can use the sort of lessons that we've learned by sitting with the emotions that we're good at sitting with and start applying them to the other emotions, which is kind of fascinating and interesting.
I love what you said about the sacred pause. What are some phrases, can you share with listeners? Because I think we all would love a couple back pocket things that we can say when we are feeling overwhelmed with emotion to a partner or to a loved one, or for someone who is going through addiction right now, like something that they can say to folks that would help family members be supportive of their journey.
Sure. So some ones that I have used: you're not your pain. Pain is just a vibration. My favorite one I say all the time, it's a little bit lengthy, but it's worth it. You're not your mind. You're not your body. You're not your thought. You're the consciousness that flows below the surface. Your body loves you. It is a beautiful vessel that carries you. Your body is a temple. You don't have to resist reality. You can embrace it and accept it. Everything starts with unconditional love. Those are a few.
I love those. And saying unconditional love kind of leads me to one of the next things I wanted to ask you about in terms of addiction and recovery, which is that overcoming an addiction takes a ton of discipline, right? But at the same time, I've heard you mention on this episode and the other one, the word softness so many times, right? You need softness, you need self-compassion, you need self-love. At the same time, you need discipline and maybe a new schedule to form new habits, maybe even to make new friends. There could be a lot. But but how can we balance, all of us as addicts in our own ways, playing that line? It's sort of like between freedom and responsibility, or between self-compassion and strict discipline.
That's good, because when I first showed up to yoga, when I was really getting into my practice, I was, using tapas as a, way to, I have to show up and I have to do this and do a full, Ashtanga primary series every day, or I'm not good enough. And it was, for sure, I was like being disciplined and showing up, but for all the wrong reasons. And so I think that non-harm principle of ahimsa in place before we come to the discipline is totally necessary. And so knowing our intention for keeping our discipline and showing up. So for example, if we don't really care about something, right? So for example, a house plant, right? Like, I don't really care about that. You're not going to really, play with it. You're not going to water it. You're not going to pay attention to it. It will wilt. And so it doesn't have value to you. So if you have something else, like a car or something, and you're like, I'm going to polish this baby every day and I'm going to pay attention to it, and it's going to last a lot longer. It has so much value. The energetic and emotional connotation you have with it is vibrating so much higher. And so if we apply that to ourselves, if you are constantly berating yourself, like you look in the mirror, you're like, ugh, really? Ugh. And just saying all these nasty things about yourself, never standing up for yourself, and just being mean to yourself, you're going to have very low value. And when what you don't value, you don't show up for, right? And so that self-love and self-care aspect, that's where the softening comes in. So a lot of times for me, when I started coming to yoga, it was so foreign to me because I was just so used to like pushing through things and, being tense and, feelings. I don't have feelings, even though, I'm a woman, I don't have feelings. I'm tough. And so it required me to soften, to crack open this armor that I had on my heart. And when I did that, I found what true strength really is, which it's this strength from within. It's this strength to encourage, to really get to know yourself and access your gifts and serve, right? That's like the highest is that surrender and serving. And so when I started accessing that part of myself, the discipline came, right? So there's little tricks and tips, right? As a life coach, I can shell out a bunch of little tricks and tips to where you can show up and blog daily, and, you can list out your goals and tick them off and whatnot. And that stuff's important too, but that won't be sustainable. That won't carry you through long term. It won't stick around unless you start loving yourself and showing up for yourself, in a bigger way.
Do you think to overcome addiction or to overcome a bad habit that people need a coach, or is this something people can do on their own?
I think that everyone's different. So for me, it's funny, the word coach. I love that word because I've had coaches my whole life, right? So I've had my sensei, I've had, my derby coaches, I've had, my yoga teachers. And so for me, because my mind and my space was so dark, I needed a solid voice that I could listen to and to guide me and hold space for me, because I didn't know how to do any of that. And so for me, it was the most valuable to have a coach for at least part of my journey. But my coaches taught me how to fish and didn't just give me the fish. And that's important. So for some people, I think that, they'll do way better by hiring a coach, which is awesome, because, that's why I do what I do, is because some people need my services. And then there's other people that, they're in a space where they stumble upon like a podcast or, an online program, or sometimes they figure it out themselves and they know what they need to do and they just stick to it. That's awesome. So I think, again, it's like different people require different things. It's like different kinds of learners, right? So some are audio learners, and some are visual, some are experiential. And so I think if you know what kind of learner you are, like for me, for online programs, unless it's a very special tailored one, I'm not going to follow it. I like the one-on-one experience, and I like to be in person with people. Like that works really good for me. And I love that connection. But somebody else might benefit from that same program so much more. And so I think if you just kind of know what kind of learner you are and what you respond to, then you can get the best benefits.
I love that idea of really focusing on what kind of learner you are, because I think a lot of times we just think we need to do what's cheapest or most cost effective or most convenient. And it's really behooves all of us to really think about and reflect on, well, how do I actually learn best? And then really put your dollars towards that. Erin, I know you wanted to share with us how a lot of these techniques you've talked to us about show up on the mat, how they show up in your own yoga practice. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah. So creating space is a skill. And I have a lot of people ask me like, Erin, I hear you talk about creating space. I kind of know what that means, but what does that mean? And so I think, we learn how to create space first with our breath, right? So in between the inhale and the exhale, there's a small pause. There's space. So between the giving and the taking, there is just being. And I think that is an important lesson. And for sure, yoga usually comes back to the breath. Without the breath, it's just weird gymnastics, right? And so learning how to create space within ourselves with our breath and then through our bodies, right, in our joints, stretching our muscles. And then I think we start to create space in our thought, right? So there is spaciousness between the thoughts, even though it feels like a lot of times we don't have that. It's possible we can get better at sort of dropping into it. And so I think by coming to our mat, which in my Thriving After Addiction program, I tell people, I want you to do yoga 3 times a week, and start a meditation practice as well as life coaching. And I give these different tools because that's what I needed to become my best self and to get over a lot of the sabotaging habits that I have gotten into. And so that's one example. Confidence, building confidence, that is a practice skill. And so if we come to the mat and we're willing to try, right, either at the, with an instructor or on our own, getting out of our comfort zone, and then maybe we fall, right? Making mistakes and failing is a huge practice, and it's a huge skill for us to learn. And, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, holding warrior 2 or warrior 3 for, a couple of minutes, your muscles start to burn. And so can you find stillness within that discomfort? And I always like to bring it back to the yoga practice because I think some of this stuff like the thoughts and the emotions and all that can go very to the woo, which I don't mind hanging with the woo. And I think you're the same. But a lot of people, like, they want to feel something. They want like some sort of physical evidence. And I think that's like a great thing about yoga is because I'm like, oh, well, you do this practice and, you can touch your toes afterwards and you can breathe. If I said, I opened my yoga studio, I'm like, all right, everybody, come on in if you want spiritual enlightenment. If you want to get a little bit closer to that, I'd probably be dead. I wouldn't have any students. And so if we can bring them in with sort of the things that are going to appeal to the logical mind, then we can do the deeper work underneath. And that's all practice. We could take that off of the mat because yoga is union, right? It's all connected. How you treat yourself on the mat is going to be reflective of how you treat yourself off of the mat, for sure.
I couldn't agree with that more. I really do see the mat and our time on the mat as a microcosm of how we're treating ourselves and running our whole life. So that's so beautiful. And yes, we are very, very like-minded. Erin, thanks so much for sharing all of this with us. And to close, I'd like to do a lightning round. Are you up for it?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so lightning round question number 1 is, do you use and what's your take on affirmations?
Yes, I do use affirmations, but my only thing about affirmations is it's like if you have a bunch of negative things in your head and you use affirmations, it's like putting a little bit of clean water on top of a cup of dirty water. You're going to get some dirt in your mouth. And so for sure, you need to go into your darkness to come into the light. Once you have more space, you can use those affirmations.
So almost like you have to do that feeling the feelings work first.
Totally. You got to create some space.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Never give up, I think, is the first thing that comes into my mind. But I think that was implanted there from my karate sensei. You never give up.
Is there anything you still find yourself struggling with?
Yeah, totally. So sometimes I have compare contrasty moments with body image, and I am constantly working on that. So I just, when it sort of runs away, my mind goes, in that direction. I bring it back and I remind myself why I love myself, what I love about my body. And then I address also like what triggered this. And I, like I said about the affirmations, I go into the darkness a little bit and I spend a little bit more time with myself because I need that.
What is something about you that would surprise our listeners?
I play roller derby.
That's awesome. I love it.
Thank you. It's actually quite an athletic sport nowadays, and I really love it. And I actually started doing it because I wanted to work on my social health. Right. So as a recovery, we have a tendency to isolate sometimes. And so when I found myself wanting to work, you can always hide underneath the guise of, I'm working hard. I was like, you know what, I need more connection. And so in the intention of that, I decided to join a team, and I absolutely love it.
That's very cool that you recognize that lack of community in your environment or space and proactively tried to create that for yourself, or are creating that for yourself. I love that. I really admire that.
Thank you.
And last question, is there one thing that you would urge Savannah listeners to do or to add to their practice at home?
Yes. Meditate. Notice your thoughts, because they will be controlling your emotions from the background. And if you don't take time to create space and notice them, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities to really grow and take your life in the direction to where you're a limitless being, really expressing your gifts in the world.
Beautiful. And you said our thoughts control our emotions. It's not the other way around, that our emotions control our thoughts, correct?
That is my belief. I think it all starts with a thought, but I think a lot of the times people are unaware of the thought because it's so buried in the subconscious. It becomes a belief system. But every time I've coached someone, when we get down to the root, there's always a painful belief. And when we prove that belief wrong, or we even just uproot it and just kind of look at it and see that it's not true, the emotion goes away.
That's such a powerful, important detail, and I'm so glad that you got to share it with us, and thank you so much for spending time with us on the show. Erin, if there are listeners who want to connect with you, they're interested in either your coaching program or maybe they're struggling with an eating disorder, specific addictions, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. So they can reach out to me, Erin@erincoach.com. They can also go to my website, thrivingafteraddiction.com. I am on Instagram. Again, it's instagram.com/thrivingafteraddiction. Facebook, you can like the page, you can message me. So there's multiple ways that you can reach out to me.
Beautiful Savannah listeners, let me know what you thought of this week's episode and our beautiful guest, Erin. Did you have any aha moments? I would love to hear from you either in the private Facebook group or in the form of an iTunes rating or review. Those ratings and reviews here on iTunes mean so much, and it helps get the show in front of more people looking to improve their life through yoga and meditation, just like you and me. I hope you have a beautiful day today. Take a deep breath, find time to meditate, do yoga, and practice some of that self-inquiry that Erin and I really talked about on today's podcast. Sending you so much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.